I opened my eyes and saw sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows onto the wooden floor, with the familiar scent of expensive perfume and a faintly sweet aroma of essential oils floating in the air. The electronic calendar on the desk clearly showed the date. I took a deep breath and confirmed that I had really returned to half a year ago. Everything in front of me felt warm and refined, but memories from my previous life raged through my nerves like cold iron rails. In the previous life, it was in this high-end apartment that my roommate Chloe used my credit history and guarantor status to drag me into the abyss step by step. On the surface, she appeared to be a warm-hearted, affluent best friend, but secretly she exploited my identity to sign various addenda, and after revelry and indulgence, she'd dock thousands of dollars in rent gaps, compensation, and exorbitant penalties onto me. When I was chased by the landlord for debts, my credit score was wiped clean, and I was even investigated by the school. She stood outside the crowd with her new boyfriend, grinning as she watched me, like a drowning dog, be pushed to the edge. This time, I would not give her another chance to perform. I got off the bed, walked to the desk, and opened the laptop labeled with my personal tag. Chloe was still asleep in the next room. Last night she had brought a group of people into the living room and drank until dawn. I walked through the living room, stepping on the alcohol-stained floor. In the center of the living room stood various high-end pieces of furniture and decorations. This apartment was jointly rented in both our names, but the lease's addenda concealed a huge trap. I made no sound, directly pulled out the original rental agreement from 6 months ago from the drawer, scanned it page by page with my phone at high precision, and uploaded it to an encrypted cloud drive in real time. Next, I dialed the prearranged professional housing lawyer Mr. Evans. When the call connected, I did not express any emotion. I spoke in the calmest possible tone, listing the contract terms, bill payment records, and our 2 bank transfer details one by one. Mr. Evans quickly cross-checked the data and soon clearly pointed out the loopholes in the contract. Chloe had secretly added several irrevocable joint liability clauses in the addenda, and the priority order for all bill deductions was set to come out of my bank account. I hung up and logged into the Housing Management online customer service system. I submitted a formal independent financial audit of housing lease request, requiring the management office to provide detailed statements of all communal charges, equipment maintenance fees, and penalties since occupancy, and clearly requested complete financial separation between my personal account and Chloe's account. The management office's efficiency was high. 10 minutes later, the system replied with a confirmation email, indicating that the audit process had officially started and attached a financial independence confirmation form that both parties needed to sign. Having done all this, I walked into the kitchen and began organizing my personal belongings. Chloe's voice came from the corridor. She was wearing silk pajamas, rubbing her eyes as she walked out, seeing me tidying up the papers, a habitual sweet smile on her lips. "Good morning. Why did you wake up so early today? By the way, for the party we're hosting next week, I've arranged it already. The guests will be senior members of the Alumni Association, so don't forget to update your credit card authorization so the management office can deduct the party's advance deposit." I looked at her face, full of entitlement, and gently closed the computer screen, smiling as I replied, "No problem. I'll take care of all the documents and authorizations today." Chloe turned away with satisfaction to make coffee, completely unaware that I had already recorded the entire oral conversation in which she had just requested authorization. I returned to my room, opened the audit preparation checklist sent by the lawyer, and checked off each item as I verified the hidden charges from my previous life that she had secretly paid with my credit card. I took out a brand new electronic notebook and began organizing every key time point and financial transaction path. At 2 in the afternoon, I arrived punctually at Mr. Evans's law firm. In the quiet consultation room, I laid out all the sorted photocopies of bills, notarized electronic evidence, and the freshly generated housing financial audit report in a row. Mr. Evans looked at the extremely detailed, flawless chain of evidence on the table, a hint of surprise flashing in his eyes. I looked at him and clearly stated my demands. First, to completely complete the legal separation of the lease contract between Chloe and me without alerting her. Second, to return all default debts signed personally by her and not authorized by me in writing to her personally. Third, to activate a personal credit risk isolation protection mechanism. The lawyer quickly drafted the legal documents and stamped the firm's seal on the relevant agreements. After obtaining this legally binding risk isolation document, I went directly to the local credit oversight institution, submitted an application for identity information anti-fraud protection, and completely locked my personal credit account. Any guarantee, renewal, or high-value consumption authorization not signed by me in person at the scene would be directly blocked in the system and trigger an alert. When night fell and I returned to the apartment, Chloe was sitting on the sofa on the phone with her friend, loudly discussing how luxurious the upcoming carnival party would be. When she saw me come in, she waved me over, pointed at the stack of party service order forms on the table, and said, "I've already checked everything off for you. These are the lease agreements for top-tier catering and sound equipment. Just sign your name at the bottom, and we can lock in the most premium services." I took the stack of documents and gave them a light shake in my hand, the pages making a crisp sound as they collided. Chloe's gaze was fixed intently on my right hand, her meticulously made-up eyes barely containing a barely suppressed excitement. I didn't put pen to paper right away. Instead, I slowly settled onto the other side of the sofa, pulled out my phone, opened the audio recording and video archiving app, and angled the edge of the lens toward the documents on the table and Chloe's face. "Chloe," I came straight to the point, my voice calm without a trace of ripple. "The top-tier catering and high-end audio equipment rental in this contract, the upfront payment and deposit together are no small sum. As we agreed before, all party expenses and subsequent costs for the apartment must have an extremely clear division of responsibility. Are you sure you're taking the lead on all items and bearing the final costs?" Chloe froze for a moment, clearly not expecting me to ask so directly to her face. But eager to get me to sign quickly, she immediately smoothed over her hesitation, straightened her back, and said in a loud voice, "Of course. This is a party I organized using Alumni Association resources. Everyone coming is someone of standing in the circle. All the arrangements were planned by me single-handedly, so of course I'm fully responsible for the costs. All you need to do is sign as a co-tenant to help get it approved. If anything goes wrong, I'll take the heat." "Good." I nodded, placed my phone on the table, and made sure her words were fully recorded. Then, from my bag, I took out the copies of legal documents prepared in advance by Mr. Evans' law firm, along with a notarized independent liability for lease statement. I slid the statement, along with the party rental contract, across to her. "Since you've committed to taking full responsibility, to avoid any confusion in the management office's financial accounting later, we need to sign this document first. It clearly states that from today onward, all supplementary agreements regarding this apartment, party service fees, and any possible extension costs are your personal actions and have nothing to do with my personal credit or assets." Chloe frowned slightly, a flicker of wariness flashing in her eyes. She picked up the legally binding statement and flipped through a couple of pages, but the dense legal jargon quickly got on her nerves. In her view, this was just a formality I was putting on to dodge petty everyday expenses. Combined with her urgency to lock in those high-end vendors, she sneered, "You really are penny pinching. Fine, I'll sign. Do you think I can't afford this?" She casually grabbed the pen from the table, signed her English name in a flourish on the statement, and pressed her fingerprint. The moment she signed, I reached over, took the document, confirmed the signature was correct, immediately photographed it for evidence with my phone, and uploaded it on the spot to the lawyer's notarization system. Then, I picked up the party order form. Instead of signing in the usual joint guarantor section, I crossed out the joint liability clause entirely, signed my name in the on-site coordinator section, and attached the number of the just-signed independent statement. Early the next morning, I took all the documents to the apartment management office again. The manager received me, and I handed over Chloe's personally signed liability statement, the notarized audio recording, and the independent audit report of the lease. Under Section 42 of the Local Housing Rental Act, as well as the supplementary agreement we signed, I said, looking at the manager with a firm tone, "I request the immediate termination of my joint guarantor relationship with Chloe. From now on, any subsequent changes, additional bills, or party deposits for this apartment can only be collected from Chloe personally. If the management office continues to deduct any fees from my account without my written consent, My lawyer will file a lawsuit directly with the court. The person in charge carefully reviewed the notarization issued by Mr. Evans' law firm, then cross-checked Chloe's handwritten signature and audio evidence, his expression turning very serious. After confirming that the legal procedures were fully compliant, he quickly operated on the computer and printed out a legally binding unilateral lease termination and responsibility transfer confirmation on the spot. As the printer's sound ceased, I stamped and signed the certificate. The system backend immediately updated. My name was completely removed from the list of the primary payer and joint guarantor for this premium apartment, and Chloe became the sole legal tenant and the full debt bearer of this property. I tucked the confirmation into my briefcase and walked out of the management building. The sun shone on me as I took out my phone, sent a confirmation message to Mr. Evans, and then sent a copy of the transfer confirmation to the management office's archival library backup via encrypted email. When I returned to the apartment, Chloe was standing in the hallway on the phone, boasting to a friend with extreme pride. "Don't worry, everything is arranged. The party will be the most luxurious of the year, and all the bills have already gone through the process." I walked through the hall to my room and casually shut the door. Over the next few days, Chloe's moves grew bolder. Immersed in the vanity of the upcoming lavish party, she began ordering exorbitantly expensive services left and right. At 3 in the afternoon, I sat in the armchair in the corner of the living room, a cup of clear tea in hand, coldly watching as several employees of a luxury rental company in uniforms carried in box after box of high-end tableware, crystal glasses, and top-tier indoor audio equipment. Chloe, in high heels, paced back and forth across the living room, pointing and commanding the workers on where to place things, looking as haughty as a queen. "Put this ice bucket right in the center of the bar," she barked, then pulled out an order form and handed it to the team leader. "This is what we agreed on. Besides this equipment, I also need 6 professional bartenders and 4 private chefs tomorrow night to prepare top-grade ingredients on site." The team leader took the form, checked the amount, and smiled politely as he reminded her, "All right, Ms. Chloe. This batch of high-end equipment plus the custom catering service for tomorrow night comes to a total of $15,000. Per our policy, you'll need to pay a 50% deposit up front and settle the balance before the party begins. Additionally, given the high value of this equipment, you'll need to provide a third-party guarantee card with a substantial credit limit." At the mention of the guarantee card, Chloe's gaze instinctively swept toward me. In my previous life, it was at this exact moment that she, citing the process as too complicated, "We'll settle everything in one go after the party," secretly took my credit card authorization and saddled all the prepaid deposits and potential indemnity guarantees onto my account. She approached me with a smile, casually picking up the contract from the table and handing it to me. "Darling, just let me swipe your high-limit credit card as the guarantee. You know my funds are frozen in an investment account for a few days. Once they're unfrozen, I'll transfer the money right back to you." I set down my teacup, looked up at her, and said with an utterly unreadable expression, "My credit card just underwent a limit adjustment yesterday and is currently locked, so it can't be used for any third-party guarantee payments." Chloe's smile froze on her face instantly, a flicker of irritation flashing in her eyes. "What do you mean? Weren't you just saying a few days ago that your limit was more than enough? Now the vendors are all here waiting. How am I supposed to save face? It's the bank system maintenance. There's nothing I can do." I stood up, my tone perfectly calm. "Besides, we just signed the liability separation statement in front of the management and our lawyers. All these service orders are your personal actions, so you should use your own account to secure the guarantee." The team leader, standing nearby, overheard our exchange and his expression grew subtle. Politely but firmly, he interjected, "Ms. Chloe, per our policy, if we can't secure a valid guarantee and deposit payment, we have to immediately withdraw all equipment already delivered and cancel tomorrow night's service reservation." The workers around them all stopped in their tracks, turning to look at Chloe. The friends she'd invited for an early tour of the apartment also cast doubtful glances her way. Her overwhelming vanity made it impossible for Chloe to accept losing face in front of everyone. Her complexion flushed from white to red as she gritted her teeth and declared loudly, "Who said I can't pay? I'll swipe my card right now." She yanked her own credit card from her designer bag and thrust it at the team leader. But when the leader swiped it through the POS machine twice, Both times it emitted a harsh error tone. The transaction was declined. Insufficient funds. The atmosphere in the room dropped to freezing in an instant. A fine, cold sweat broke out on Chloe's forehead. She nervously pulled out her phone to perform the transfer, but I had already cut off the path she was trying to use to apply for a temporary large loan on an internet finance platform through a preset credit risk isolation system for our shared rental address. Seeing that she was backed into a corner, I stepped in front of the team leader and presented my own ID and the notarized lease and financial independence statement. "Hello," I said clearly to the team leader. "I am another resident of this apartment, but this is my identity isolation statement and the proof issued by the management office. All party services, high-end equipment, and catering support ordered by Mrs. Chloe are entirely her unilateral actions. I will not bear any guarantee liability, nor will I allow any bill to be under my name. Please ensure that when you issue all deposit and final payment invoices, the payer's name is clearly signed as Chloe personally." The team leader carefully checked my documents and nodded after confirming they were in order. "Understood. Thank you for your cooperation. We will only pursue the related charges from the customer who signed the order form." Then the team leader turned to Chloe, his tone formal. "Ms. Chloe, since your credit card cannot pay the security deposit, we need you to sign a personal debt acknowledgement and an electronic asset pledge agreement, binding the deposit of $15,000 and the final payment bill directly to your personal name, or we will clear the scene right now." Under the gaze of companions around and the inescapable stalemate, Chloe, gnashing her teeth in hatred, could only tremble as she signed her name on the personal independent debt acknowledgement handed to her by the team leader, in order to preserve the affluent image she had carefully cultivated. The moment the bill was generated, the system's deduction notification was directly sent to her personal email, while my phone received no alert. I turned around, gently folded my ID documents, and walked back to my own room. On the eve of the raucous party, the entire apartment building was immersed in a strange state of excitement and restlessness. In the room next door, Chloe was on the phone, loudly boasting to her high society friends about the extravagant event tomorrow night. In her words, this high-end apartment in the city center had become her personal private property. Yet, she had no idea that I was already standing on a battlefield in another dimension. At 2 a.m, as the city fell into deep slumber, Chloe's bedroom finally quieted down, the air thick with the smell of alcohol. I gently pushed open the door. The living room was piled high with the top-tier luxury decorations and audio equipment she had rented over the past 2 days, while my room was fully prepared. Without making a sound, I quickly sent a confirmation command on my phone to the professional moving company I had booked in advance. Within 5 minutes, 3 unmarked, enclosed moving trucks quietly stopped in the underground parking lot of the apartment building. Accompanying the trucks were 5 movers in professional uniforms, fully certified. "According to the list, only move the items with yellow labels," I said, handing the pre-printed inventory sheet to the team leader. Over the next 2 hours, an extremely efficient and silent room-clearing operation unfolded entirely. In my past life, all the high-end furniture I had paid for in this apartment, the imported appliances, and even the extremely expensive art dinnerware set in the kitchen were destroyed and trampled by Chloe's friends after the party, eventually being charged as damages to me by management. But this time, I would leave behind not even a single screw that belonged to me. My custom sofa, solid wood desk, top-tier air purification system, and even my personally installed smart home network terminal and artistic lighting fixtures were dismantled, packed, and boxed by the moving crew at lightning speed. My movements were precise. Before each item was carried out, I photographed its full view and details with a high-resolution camera and had the moving team leader sign and notarize the property transfer form, confirming that everything belonged to my personal property and was in perfect condition before leaving the apartment. At 4:30 a.m, the once cozy and full room was completely stripped of all my basic living amenities, except for the temporary decorations Chloe had rented and her pile of worn-out clothes in the hallway. The high-speed broadband, smart floor heating system, and premium water purification service, all paid for from my personal account, had also been cancelled and terminated via the online system half an hour earlier. The entire house instantly turned cold, empty, and devoid of life. I dragged my last carry-on suitcase to the entrance. By then, The senior housing supervisor from the apartment management, Mr. Miller, whom I had arranged to meet, was already waiting outside the door. "Ma'am, are you sure you want to proceed with the personal property clearance and on-site handover now?" Mr. Miller asked quietly, holding the lease termination confirmation document. "Yes," I replied, handing over the prepared documents and the asset certificates from the notary office. "All my personal belongings have been removed, and no physical damage has been caused to the premises. From this moment on, I formally return my keys and electronic access permissions." Mr. Miller quickly inspected the room with professional equipment, confirmed that the area under my name was completely vacant and undamaged, and then placed the final legal signature on the electronic handover form. "Handover complete," Mr. Miller said, handing me a formal certificate of personal property clearance and housing rights termination. "From now on, you are no longer a legal resident of this unit, nor do you bear any future physical maintenance or usage risks for this property." I took the certificate and handed over the smart access card in my hand. At that moment, the system let out a crisp sound, and my fingerprint and facial recognition permissions were completely revoked from the apartment building's access control database. I dragged my suitcase into the elevator. At 8 o'clock that evening, the party reached its peak. Luxurious music thundered through the hallway as more than a dozen celebrities and influencers in formal attire mingled in the living room, raising champagne glasses and laughing boisterously. Chloe stood at the center of the living room, basking in the crowd's attention, her face radiating unparalleled pride. However, she completely failed to notice that the underfloor heating had long stopped running. The air temperature was dropping sharply, and due to a network outage, the top-tier audio equipment could only awkwardly emit a thin, feeble sound through a portable Bluetooth connection. Just as Chloe raised her glass to address the room, a heavy knock suddenly echoed from the front door. Before anyone could react, Mr. Harrison, the building's top landlord, strode in cold-faced with two legal officers in black suits. Mr. Harrison was the representative of the investment group behind the building, renowned in the industry for his extremely ruthless methods and intolerance for any irregularities. The noisy scene instantly fell silent as the legal officer unplugged the music. Chloe frowned, frost on her face as she stepped forward. "Mr. Harrison, what do you think you're doing? I'm hosting a private high-end party here. Barging in like this is a blatant disrespect to me and my guests." Mr. Harrison didn't even lift his eyelids. He reached out, took a thick stack of legal documents from the officer, and slammed it hard onto the crystal table in the living room. "Respect?" Mr. Harrison's voice was as piercing as ice. "According to the property audit we just completed, this apartment not only illegally modified the infrastructure but also hosted an oversized commercial party without prior approval. More importantly," he paused, staring at Chloe with icy eyes. "As of 5 o'clock this afternoon, this property's quarterly premium rent, late fees, fines for illegal renovations, and compensation for the circuit damage caused by forced overloaded power usage last week, totaling $50,000, are fully overdue." The room erupted in murmurs as guests began whispering, many casting curious and skeptical glances. Chloe's face instantly turned pale, but she still forced herself to hold her head high and shouted, "Why are you coming at me? This apartment was jointly leased by me and my roommate. Even if there are bills, we split them 50-50. She's deliberately hiding and refusing to come out. You should go after her for the $50,000. Why are you bothering my party?" As she yelled, she frantically pointed at my completely empty room door. "She's in there. Go drag her out." Mr. Harrison let out a mocking sneer. He gestured, and the legal officer behind him immediately produced a legal certification document stamped by the court and the management office, displaying it to everyone present. "Ms. Chloe, it seems you have completely failed to face reality." The officer's clear voice rang through the entire living room. "As early as 4 days ago, your roommate submitted a fully compliant declaration of independent liability and single-party lease termination confirmation to the management office and notary. Legally, she has already completed the full termination procedures and settled all fees belonging to her individual share." The officer flipped to the final page of the document and held the official seal up to Chloe's eyes. "Early this morning, the management office formally accepted her physical handover of the property. Under the current lease, the sole tenant, the sole debt bearer, And the only party being pursued for this $50,000 bill is you, Chloe alone. That's impossible. You're lying to me. How could she terminate the lease? I never agreed. Chloe screamed and lost control, charging toward my room and frantically shoving the door open. But the room behind the door was completely empty. No bed, no table, not a single piece of clothing, even the curtains had been stripped away, leaving only cold concrete walls and bare flooring. The overwhelming emptiness slammed into Chloe's chest like a heavy hammer, and her legs gave way as she nearly collapsed to the floor. Mr. Harrison didn't give her a moment to catch her breath. He pulled the final formal demand for payment from his briefcase and pressed it in front of her. $50,000. Due in full within 24 hours. If it doesn't arrive by then, we will immediately petition the court for enforced collection against your personal assets. Simultaneously report your serious default to all major credit bureaus, and notify your school and internship employer. The claustrophobic dread in the dead end gnawed at Chloe's nerves like a venomous snake. A sky-high bill of $50,000 loomed as an insurmountable mountain, ready to crush her within 24 hours. In the empty, cold room, she watched guests scatter as if fleeing a plague, and the compliments and praise that once surrounded her instantly turned into taunts and whispered rumors in her ears. Driven by a huge fear, she made the dumbest and most decision, risk it all by illegally shifting this exorbitant debt onto others. At 11 o'clock at night, Chloe locked the door, curled up on the only sofa in the living room, and with trembling hands opened an unregulated underground high-interest lending platform. The platform targeted college students who urgently needed funds but required extremely high guarantees. Because her own credit limit had long since maxed out and was frozen, the system popped up a warning. Need a cosigner with high credit score. A trace of malice and paranoia flashed in Chloe's eyes. In her view, my sudden move and withdrawal of responsibility was the most complete betrayal. She believed all of this should have been paid by me. She opened her phone's photo album and pulled up the copies of my personal identification documents stolen during the processing of certain procedures in our previous life together, as well as photos of my old handwritten signatures. She skillfully used image synthesis software to forge my signature and paste it onto the joint guarantee contract for the high-interest loan. Then she entered my social security number and personal information, attempting to apply for a $60,000 emergency high-interest loan to placate the landlord, Mr. Harrison, and his debt collection. However, she had no idea that from the day I reborn, I had already set up the top-level personal credit freeze and real-time misuse alerts with the 3 national credit monitoring agencies, Experian, Equifax, TransUnion, and the Anti-Fraud Center. When she clicked Submit Application, my encrypted phone screen instantly glowed red, and a crystal-clear system alert popped up. Warning: unauthorized use of personal identity information on an unapproved third-party lending platform detected. Geolocation locked to the rental address. Attempting to authorize high-amount loan guarantees. I was sitting at a clean, bright desk in my new apartment, watching the data on the screen flicker and the live preview of the forged documents. A cold smile curled at the corners of my mouth. I wasn't remotely panicked, because everything was part of the trap I had set. I didn't call Chloe directly. Instead, I dialed the direct line of Detective Vance, head of the District Police Department's Economic Crime Investigation Division, with whom I had long since established contact, and I instantly forwarded all evidence to my lawyer, Mr. Evans. Detective Vance, I spoke calmly and with perfect clarity. The identity theft monitoring system I reported to your bureau has just triggered an alert. Someone is using my stolen identity information and forged signatures to apply for a $60,000 high-interest loan on an illegal online lending platform. The IP address and real location completely coincide. Currently at City Center, a high-end apartment, room 1202. I request immediate intervention by law enforcement for on-site evidence collection and crime interception. 5 minutes later, the precinct's rapid response team and Detective Vance arrived at my new residence to meet me, accompanied by Mr. Evans, the lawyer, and the notary public's on-site records clerk. Our group drove directly to the old apartment. At this moment, in the old apartment's living room, Chloe was staring fixedly at the computer screen, waiting for the loan approval notification. Because the system prompt requires the final step of identity verification and signature legality check, she thought it was just routine, unaware that this was actually a delay mechanism deliberately set by the anti-fraud system to lock in evidence of crime. Ding dong, the doorbell suddenly rang urgently. Chloe, assuming it was a supplier or landlord returning, walked over in extreme impatience and pushed the door open. I told you I'd pay you tomorrow. Don't bother me again. Before she could finish speaking, her voice froze in her throat. Standing outside the door, besides me with a stern expression, were 3 cops in formal attire wearing law enforcement recording devices, and Mr. Evans, the lawyer, holding a briefcase. Ms. Chloe, Detective Vance directly flashed the search warrant and police badge. His voice grave. We received an online tip and the anti-fraud center system detected that you are suspected of impersonating someone else, forging legal signatures, and conducting large-scale financial fraud. Please immediately stop all operations on your computer and cooperate with our investigation. Chloe's face instantly lost all color. She instinctively tried to rush back to the living room to close the computer, but 2 police officers moved faster, quickly controlling the scene in full screen, recording the computer interface, running the loan software, and sealing the site. How dare you arrest me? This is a private financial dispute between me and her. Chloe struggled, screaming, I'm her roommate. I have the right to use her authorization in an emergency. She's setting me up. Mr. Evans, the lawyer, sneered and pulled out a freshly printed judicial appraisal report and system logs from his briefcase, presenting them directly to the police and the law enforcement recording devices. Ms. Chloe, according to the anti-fraud system records, the signature document you submitted has an image overlap completely identical to my client's previous signatures, forged through illegal software manipulation. At the same time, my client had already completed a full risk isolation and lease termination proof earlier. Your actions have fully constituted serious identity theft and financial fraud. Detective Vance's gaze turned icy as he watched the extremely solid forging process and data transfer logs on the computer screen. He produced metal handcuffs and, with a crisp clang, fastened Chloe's wrists. Ms. Chloe, you now have the right to remain silent, but everything you say will be used as evidence in court. You are currently under arrest for suspected third-degree financial fraud, identity theft, and forgery. The cold touch of the handcuffs completely shattered Chloe. She looked at the flashing lights around her, the stern faces of the police, and me, sitting on the diagonal sofa calmly sipping water, finally realizing the dire straits she had fallen into. She was forcibly escorted out of the building, and neighbors rushing over in the corridor to film with their phones. She was shoved into a police car, her hair in disarray. After being taken away by the police and granted bail, Chloe didn't bow to admit fault. Instead, she unloaded her last bit of spite on my career. She knew I had just passed through multiple screenings and won the final interview offer from top consulting firm Vane and Company, and earned a core project team internship. So she began to flood internal company chat groups, anonymous forums, and industry mailing lists with vicious rumors about me. A new intern on the surface is a top student, but behind the scenes is an extreme egoist who owes debts, escapes, and launders a roommate's luxury goods for cash. The defamatory article was filled with heavily edited photos. The moving scenes I uploaded when cleaning out my room were framed as a late-night flight. The luxury items I bought and took away were smeared as stealing while the roommate was away. And there was even a forged debt collection notice attached. The rumors spread rapidly within the company, even triggering the HR department and senior partners. At 10 a.m. Monday, Vane and Company's senior leadership held a special evaluation meeting in the large conference room on the 30th floor. The room felt somber. Several senior partners who controlled intern placements sat solemnly on one side of the long table. Chloe wore an expensive but slightly disheveled professional outfit, sat beside the podium with tears of grievance at the corners of her eyes, and loudly accused the partners. All of you, this moral corruption, suspected criminal activity, if she remains in our company, will absolutely deal a devastating blow to the company's brand reputation. I request that the company immediately revoke her admission and issue an industry-wide notice. After she finished her accusation and the partners frowned, the meeting room door was gently pushed open. I walked in, dressed in a sharp black suit, carrying a refined briefcase, calm and composed. I did not spare Chloe a glance, directly approached the podium, and nodded slightly at the partners. Partners, regarding the recent unfounded rumors circulating within the company about me personally, today I bring a complete clarification package. My voice was clear and strong, echoing through the quiet meeting room. I opened the projector, and the first document instantly popped up on the screen, the official retrieval proof and mediation agreement issued by the local court. First, about the so-called debt evasion. I guided the laser pointer to the clearly stated clauses on the screen. This is a formal, liability independent statement, and a lease termination certificate issued by the apartment management. A fortnight ago, I legitimately and compliantly completed the lease handover, all fees settled, and all receipts retained by the management. The true debtor is not me, but Ms. Chloe, who is currently facing a $50,000 repayment claim from the housing management. The screen changed to show several stamped bank statements and police filing receipts. Second, about the so-called stolen items. I played the professional moving companies and the house supervisor Mr. Miller's jointly signed property transfer document from moving day, as well as all original purchase invoices and payment records for the moved items. All moved items were purchased entirely with my own funds, and the ownership belongs entirely to me. By contrast, Ms. Chloe, without my permission, repeatedly attempted to steal my credit line. She is now officially under police investigation for identity theft and financial fraud. Finally, I released the police department's Detective Vance's incident record summary, and a photo of Chloe in handcuffs from last night for allegedly forging a signature. The huge reversal left the senior partners staring at each other in astonishment, then they hardened their expressions with extreme severity. Partner Mr. Vance grabbed the evidence documents off the table and skimmed through them quickly, his doubt instantly turning into extreme displeasure with Chloe. Chloe's face went completely pale at that moment, her whole body trembling as she pointed at me and screamed, "You're lying! You forged all of this! You vicious woman!" Ms. Chloe, the HR director, cut her off coldly, his voice freezing. Spreading unverified malicious rumors within the company is a serious violation of our compliance and ethical standards. Furthermore, you are currently under criminal investigation and have concealed significant personal credit debt risks. The HR director printed out a notice on the spot, stamped it with the official seal, and handed it directly to Chloe. Per company management regulations, effective immediately, all internship eligibility and admission offers for Ms. Chloe at Vane and Company are revoked. The company reserves the right to pursue legal action for damages to our reputation and will report your misconduct to the Industry Compliance Alliance. No! You can't do this. I'm the victim. Chloe shrieked hysterically, but two company security officers had already stepped forward, flanking her and coldly escorting her out of the conference room. The hallway echoed with Chloe's desperate cries and the erratic clatter of her high heels. I stood at the podium, gracefully gathering my documents and giving the partners a slight bow. Thank you all for your time. I will continue to devote my efforts to the upcoming project work. Partner Mr. Vance watched my calm, methodical handling of the situation and broke into a satisfied smile, gently applauding me. After being completely fired by the company and reported to the Industry Compliance Alliance, Chloe's reputation had been ruined across the entire industry and school circles. With no internship stipend and facing a $50,000 bill from her landlord, Mr. Harrison, who sent people to harass her daily, as well as looming legal fees for criminal proceedings, Chloe's financial chain was completely broken. In desperation and having nowhere to turn, she set her sights on a batch of expensive items stored in the apartment's public storage room. That storage room was originally for shared use by the apartment's tenants, containing many high-end ornaments left by previous tenants, unopened artworks, and several limited edition luxury bags and rare design pieces I had temporarily stored there because the room couldn't fit them earlier. Chloe thought the storage room was a blind spot for surveillance and that the items weren't listed on the public housing move-out inventory. In her view, as long as she quietly moved these worth tens of thousands of dollars worth of luxury goods out and liquidated them on the second-hand market, she could not only raise enough for the initial legal fees but also pay part of the deposit to the landlord to delay the debt collection. However, she had no idea that from the day I resurrected and began planning to shed responsibility, I had already conducted the strictest digital tagging and ownership registration for all of my personal high-value assets. At 4 p.m, sunlight slanted across the front of a famous high-end second-hand luxury goods recovery club in the city center. Chloe, wearing oversized sunglasses and a dark mask, hurriedly dragged 2 huge suitcases into the VIP appraisal room of the club, appearing anxious. She tried to hide her unease, lifting her head arrogantly to the senior appraiser at the reception and said, "These are all my personal collections of top-tier bags and art ornaments. I'm abroad soon and need funds urgently, so I must liquidate everything today. Tell the person who can authorize here to come out and give me the highest purchase price." The appraiser put on white gloves and politely opened the suitcases. Quietly inside were 3 limited edition Hermes rare leather bags, a pair of limited baccarat crystal stemware, and a signed print by a renowned independent artist. The total market value of this batch of items was at least $35,000. Very well. Ms. Chloe, please wait a moment. We need to proceed with routine high-precision physical appraisal and ownership number verification according to procedure, the appraiser said with a smile. Chloe waved impatiently. Hurry up, I'm short on time. If the price is right, I can sign and take the money now. The appraiser, holding a high-magnification microscope and ultraviolet lamp, began inspecting the bag's stitching and leather. As his detector scanned the inner side of the Hermes bag handle and the bottom of a crystal goblet, the device suddenly emitted a faint beep. The appraiser's eyes changed, and within the concealed leather layers and crystal bases, he detected tiny nanoscale micro-positioning anti-counterfeit invisible tags. These tags not only contained a unique blockchain ownership certification hash but also embedded an extremely small near-field communication (NFC) anti-counterfeit chip. The appraiser did not reveal anything, instead using an excuse to go to the back to fetch higher-grade appraisal equipment and entered the back office, where he directly scanned the chip data with a dedicated device. The system dashboard instantly displayed extremely clear ownership registration information. Meanwhile, my mobile terminal received a high-priority geolocation alert. I was sitting in a nearby cafe next to the club, watching the address and anti-counterfeiting tag activation notification pop up on the screen, taking a small sip of coffee, and then made a joint call to the Market Regulation Bureau's enforcement team and the local police station. 10 minutes later, as Chloe sat in the VIP room, imagining converting more than $30,000 in cash to pay the attorney fees, the glass door of the VIP room was suddenly pushed open with a bang. Several staff members wearing market supervision and enforcement uniforms, accompanied by 3 police officers, walked straight into the room. I followed closely and elegantly walked into the VIP room. What is going on? Chloe suddenly stood up, nearly spilling the coffee in her hand, and when she saw me enter, the panic on her face instantly turned to furious rage. How on earth are you here? Are you following me? I went to the table, took the Hermes handbag she had placed in the most conspicuous position, and watched her calmly say, "Chloe, the items you're trying to cash out don't seem to be your private property. You stop spouting rubbish here." Chloe screamed, pointing at my nose. "I bought all of these. Whoever finds the items in the storage room is the owner. What right do you have to claim they're yours?" The head of the joint law enforcement team stepped forward, coldly producing a notarized document stamped with a seal and a blockchain ownership certificate. "Ms. Chloe, please mind your words. Based on the joint database of the Market Regulation Platform and the Public Security Department, this batch of luxury goods and artworks totaling $37,000 had already been fully invoiced, declared for customs clearance, and bound to nanoscale anti-counterfeit chips by Ms., my English name, 3 years ago." The captain operated the enforcement terminal in his hand, projecting the electronic invoices scanned by the invisible chips and the purchase flow onto the wall. Each serial number perfectly matched the physical items on the table. On the contrary, the captain stared at Chloe with an extremely stern tone. "You cannot present any purchase receipts, transfer agreements, or legitimate provenance for these items. You dismantled the locks of a public storage room without the owner's permission, appropriated someone else's enormous private property, and attempted to cash it illegally. This constitutes theft and suspected sale of stolen goods." Hearing the word theft, Chloe's face turned as pale as paper, and her knees buckled as she collapsed heavily onto the sofa's leather armrest. "No, it's not like that. I just borrowed it. I meant to return it after selling it and using the money to repay her," she frantically tried to explain, grabbing the officer's sleeves and pleading, "We're roommates. This is merely an economic dispute between us. It can't be theft. According to our country's Criminal Law and Property Protection Act." The accompanying lawyer presented supplementary legal documents, The involved amount exceeds $30,000, reaching the statutory threshold of particularly large. This is no longer a simple civil dispute but a very serious criminal offense. The club's security and the police immediately photographed, sealed, and confiscated all the luxury goods involved at the scene. 2 female officers stepped forward, produced heavy metal handcuffs, and once again snapped Chloe's wrists securely. Ms. Chloe, for illegal theft of substantial private property and attempting to dispose of the stolen goods, you will be subjected to criminal detention in accordance with the law. Under the shocked and contemptuous gaze of club staff and surrounding patrons, Chloe, like a soulless shell, was dragged out of the club by the police. After being caught red-handed by the second-hand luxury goods recycling club, Chloe's reputation and credibility were completely destroyed. However, her family living far away and a few opportunistic relatives were still trying to help her evade debt recovery and legal sanctions through illegal asset transfers. During the short 2-day window while Chloe was released on bail pending trial, she began frantically contacting one of her distant cousins. The two privately negotiated a plan to rapidly transfer the remaining personal savings under Chloe's name, the funds in her stock accounts, and the tens of thousands of dollars her parents had previously deposited into her card for daily expenses, all through multiple small amount splits and the purchase of bearer overseas cryptocurrencies into offshore accounts. Once the asset transfer was complete, she planned to tear up the bail agreement and buy a ticket on an illegal coach to flee to the border. However, she had no idea that from the moment the police filed a case against her for suspected forgery of signatures and financial fraud, I had already coordinated with attorney Mr. Evans to launch a comprehensive legal offensive against her. At 9 o'clock in the morning, in the office of the Property Preservation Division of the Municipal Intermediate Court, Mr. Evans and I stood before the judge at precisely the appointed time. On the table lay a thick stack of meticulously organized application documents, the application for pre-litigation property preservation, the notice of claim for the $50,000 joint debt stamped and confirmed by the management office, the police case registration receipt, and an equivalent collateral guarantee certificate I personally provided. Your Honor, Mr. Evans stated with extreme rigor and clarity, the defendant Chloe is currently involved in substantial civil debt disputes and multiple criminal investigations. Based on the abnormal fund flow patterns we have monitored, the defendant is frequently attempting to transfer funds from her personal bank accounts through underground financial channels and unregulated platforms, which could very likely render subsequent judgments unenforceable and seriously harm the legitimate rights and interests of my client and the victimized landlord. I submitted the notarized electronic evidence, which clearly recorded Chloe's log traces of frequent logins to overseas anonymous exchanges and attempts to bind third-party transfer tools within the past 24 hours. After carefully reviewing the entire chain of evidence and confirming that the case was extremely urgent and the evidence conclusive, the judge immediately signed the civil ruling and affixed the court seal carrying mandatory legal effect. Ruling as follows. All bank accounts, securities accounts, third-party payment interfaces, and personal assets under the defendant Chloe's name are hereby subject to comprehensive pre-litigation freezing. The moment the ruling was issued, the court's electronic enforcement system seamlessly connected with the National Unified Banking Regulatory Clearing Platform. 10 minutes later, in a remote internet cafe in the city center, Chloe, wearing a baseball cap, hid in a corner in front of a computer, her hands trembling as she logged into her online banking interface. Looking at the remaining balance of just over $40,000 in her card, she let out a long sigh of relief and quickly opened the fund transfer page, entered the overseas cryptocurrency intermediary account provided by her cousin, and clicked Confirm Transfer. However, instead of a successful transfer notification, a glaring red warning message popped up on the screen. Transaction failed. Your account has been judicially frozen by the court in accordance with the law. Freeze status. Full restriction on expenditures. For any questions, please contact the enforcing court. Chloe froze, her heart racing wildly. Thinking it was network lag, she hastily logged out and back into her securities account to try selling stocks and withdrawing cash, but the same cold prompt appeared. Abnormal account status. Under judicial freeze. All fund transfers and asset liquidation operations are prohibited. She snatched up her phone hysterically, trying to reach the customer service of a third-party payment platform, but the moment she opened the mobile banking app, she received a cascade of system messages from major banks. Dear customer, According to the ruling, 2026, Jibao Z number 884, all of your accounts at our bank have been lawfully frozen. All capital channels were cut off at that instant. Every penny in her card was firmly locked in the judicial supervision pool, and she couldn't even swipe for the cheapest bus ticket. With her financial lifeline severed, Chloe panicked completely. She trembled as she dialed a distant relative for help, only to find that after learning that her accounts were court-ordered frozen and that she was suspected of serious criminal offenses, they, to avoid being implicated, immediately put her number on their blacklist. No one dared lend her a penny, and no financial institution dared to guarantee for her. I stood on the high steps of the courthouse and received the freeze completion confirmation from the lawyer. The day of the combined civil and criminal trial has finally arrived. In the first trial chamber of the city's intermediate court, the atmosphere was so grave it felt suffocating. In the defense seat, Chloe wore prison garb, her face pale, eye sockets hollow. In just 1 month, the once arrogant and headstrong heiress had vanished without a trace. Her defense attorney wiped the cold sweat from his forehead, making a last-ditch defensive plea. "Your Honor." The opposing counsel stood up, attempting to confuse the issue. My client and the plaintiff, my English name, were previously in a close partnership and cohabitation. Regarding the rent for that high-end apartment, the $50,000 in bills, and party expenses, there was in fact a very clear oral partnership agreement between both sides. After the project incurred debt, the plaintiff deliberately tore up the oral agreement unilaterally and maliciously shifted all debts onto my client. This is a typical civil economic dispute and does not constitute a crime. Hearing the opposing counsel's distortions, I, sitting at the plaintiff's seat, remained calm, not even lifting my eyelids. When the judge looked toward our side, Mr. Evans rose gracefully and submitted to the court a complete evidence chain on a disc and in written documents that we had meticulously prepared and triple notarized. "Your Honor, what the defense counsel calls an oral agreement is pure nonsense." Mr. Evans's voice was clear and piercing. "We present the following ironclad evidence, certified by forensic notarization and third-party data node authentication. First, the large screen played the clear on-site recordings and video tracks. In the video, Chloe loudly declares, "I take full responsibility for all expenses. If something goes wrong, I'll bear it." And she signed a legally binding declaration of independent responsibility on site. Second, the digital rental termination flow and handover records issued by the management prove that long before the $50,000 bill appeared, I had legally and properly severed the entire lease relationship, and the on-site handover was flawless. Third, the records from a third-party high-level financial appraisal institution detail how Chloe, before being arrested by the police, used image synthesis software to forge my signature, attempting to illegally extract $60,000 from underground high-interest lending platforms. Fourth, the on-site surveillance and anti-counterfeit chip scanning records from a second-hand luxury goods recovery club clearly confirmed that Chloe, without permission, forced open the shared storage room locks and attempted to sell my personally registered property, expensive bags and artworks. This evidentiary chain, from recordings and digital trace trails to third-party vendor testimonies and on-site notarization transcripts, forms an unassailable logical closed loop. Mr. Evans pointed sternly at the defense seat. The defendant Chloe's conduct has long surpassed civil disputes. It is a premeditated, highly malicious identity theft, financial fraud, and colossal theft crime. Facing this flawless, unflappable chain of evidence, Chloe's defense attorney opened his mouth, but ultimately sat down with a pale face, unable to utter another word. Sitting at the defendant's seat, Chloe completely collapsed. She stared at the screen showing her former ugliness and the forged signature evidence, gripping the edge of the table with both hands, and with a despairing sob cried out, "No! It was my fault. I was momentarily confused. Please, spare me this once. We used to be the best of friends." I slowly turned my head, looking at her coldly, with no mercy in my gaze, only an abyssal chill. In a previous life, when I begged her to give me a way out, did she ever soften even a little? The judge struck the gavel heavily, and the solemn sound echoed in the courtroom. This court finds that the defendant Chloe forged signatures, used someone else's identity information to obtain large loans. The criminal acts are clear, the evidence conclusive. constituting identity theft and financial fraud, unlawfully selling another's enormous property, constituting theft. Furthermore, regarding the $50,000 house debt, the defendant bears full compensation responsibility. The moment the final judgment was delivered, the gavel struck the wooden block with a heavy, decisive sound. The presiding judge read the final verdict in a solemn voice. The defendant, Chloe, convicted of identity theft, financial fraud, and large-scale theft, with multiple sentences to be served consecutively, was sentenced to 7 years in prison and fined. Simultaneously, in the civil judgment, the court ordered Chloe to assume full responsibility for the former luxury apartment's $50,000 rent bill and liquidated damages, and to fully compensate me for all economic losses and attorney fees caused by her illegal actions. Under the marshal's escort, Chloe was forcibly removed from the courtroom. Her feet dragged across the floor, making a grating sound, and she let out despairing, helpless sobs. Her once proud youthful face had gone entirely pale. What awaited her was a long, cold prison term. During her sentence, all assets of hers that had been frozen by the judiciary would be lawfully seized and deducted. Even after release, she would carry permanent, severe credit stains and a bankruptcy record, completely ostracized by mainstream society and professional circles. As for her student status, the school issued an expulsion as soon as it received the court judgment. Her parents, too, were left utterly humiliated in their social circle because of the string of debt lawsuits and ruined reputation caused by their daughter. 3 weeks later, the court-ordered funds were successfully transferred into my bank account, and all losses were fully recovered. I stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new downtown apartment, bright and spacious, as the morning sun filled the room. The interior was furnished with the solid wood furniture and plants I had carefully selected, and the air carried a faint woody scent. There was no malice or scheming here, no false flattery, only my own independence and peace. During my internship at Vane & Company, thanks to my excellent logic and extremely rigorous risk control methods, I completed delivery of a core project ahead of schedule, earned unanimous high praise from the partners, and as a result received an official offer for a permanent position. I lifted the coffee in my hand and looked out at the busy, orderly city streets. The long, nightmare-like shadows and humiliations of my past life had been thoroughly cleansed by this complete, lawful, and precise counterattack. I gently closed the computer where I had organized all the case files and archived them permanently.